So I recently decided to rewatch Stranger Things now that it's finally over, and I started to notice something strange, things that I just can't quite seem to understand. How did a show that used to look like this somehow end up looking like this? And I became stumped by this question of, what if the story we once loved isn't the story we've been watching all along? Why does the first season of Stranger Things feel so different? How did we go from a quiet, small town cosmic horror story to a massive supernatural spectacle that somehow feels less real? Because the most terrifying thing about Stranger Things was never the monsters, it was the unknown. It was the realization that right next to our world is a version of reality that we know nothing about. Somewhere along the way, something changed. The Upside Down stopped being a haunting, silent echo of our world and started being a stage for a grand performance. So you might be asking yourself, what is it about the unknown that makes it so effective in Stranger Things? Agnosiophobia, or fear of the unknown, is one of the oldest and strongest kinds of fear. And within the context of film, it has to do with this idea of ambiguity, which is where the creator intentionally refuses to explain things so the audience is forced to fill in the gaps. Instead of showing the audience what it is they should be afraid of, they can imagine anything for themselves. And oftentimes, what we can imagine is much more terrifying than anything we could be shown. And that's what made the first couple seasons of Stranger Things so good. Every character is looking at the same mystery from a completely different angle. Nobody knows what's happening, and the show feels like it has real consequences. When Dustin gives his speech in season 2, it's not about bravado or clever dialogue. It's a moment where a kid is trying to make sense of the chaos around him, laying out a theory based on incomplete information. When he names the unknown entity,
Flayer, Mind Flayer.
What does it want?
this is just him making his best guess, and the Mind Flayer still remains mostly unknown. Similarly, the stakes feel tangible because these characters are human. They're afraid, confused, and genuinely vulnerable to forces they do not understand. The brilliance of the first season is that it refused to fully show its hand. The Upside Down isn't explained in detail, and that is exactly what makes it so unsettling. When we finally see glimpses of a decaying Hawkins, it feels otherworldly, like a corrupted reflection of our own reality. The streets of Hawkins exist there, but they're empty. The buildings are familiar, but they're covered in decay. It's a place that feels abandoned, as if reality itself has been hollowed out and left to rot. And because it isn't explained in the first season, the Upside Down becomes something much more frightening than any individual monster. And that's where the problem lies. We moved away from the primal fear of a reality that had simply forgotten us, and instead we were given a villain with a motive. Now this didn't happen right away. The introduction of the original antagonists of the Demogorgon and the Mind Flayer were great. They were still mysterious, and not much was known about them. The problem begins with the introduction of Vecna. He fundamentally changes the dynamic of the show because suddenly the unknown is given a face. Where the early seasons thrived on mystery, on the idea that the Upside Down was vast and unknown, Vecna transforms the threat into something familiar. Now the horror isn't cosmic anymore, it's just a typical villain. This is a problem because it limits the story itself. I want to go back to that idea of the unknown. One of the main ways that this was communicated was through the cinematography. Take this frame for example. How about this frame? What does this make you feel? This is the feeling that so many of us felt for the first time while watching this show. Doesn't it feel as though we are there? Like we are in the world viewing things from behind a tree? This has to do with the detached perspective of the camera framed on our characters. Many of the shots in this season are portrayed in a way to make it feel as though we are observers in this world. In episode 4, Steve and Nancy are talking at school between two buildings. She is worried about Barb and was telling Steve about what she had witnessed at his house earlier. But notice the camera angle. It appears to almost be on the ground. It feels like we are intruding on their personal conversation. This type of cinematography is present throughout this season, and it plays on the theme of observation. The Hawkins lab is after 11, and due to that, it constantly feels as if everyone is being watched. And moments like these are woven throughout the first season. It feels like we are always arriving just a little late, catching only fragments of events as they unfold. Shadows stretched across the walls, objects shift in ways that don't make sense, and the camera often lingers in corners or over shoulders, giving the impression that we are silently observing the characters. We never saw everything at once. We didn't get the hero shot that is present in later seasons. We never saw a complete view of a monster. Instead, you caught glimpses, reflections, flickers, and movements in the distance. Your imagination had to fill in the blanks. That framing reinforced the unknowable nature of the Upside Down. This comes down to the idea that the characters were navigating an unknown world. Every discovery felt partial, incomplete, and therefore frightening. Similarly, the lack of control is communicated through how often scenes are allowed to breathe. This scene from episode 6 is 40 seconds of no dialogue. So why is this important? As for the audience, you can't escape the simplicity of the framing. It almost has an unfinished quality to it, where you think there should be a cut, but the camera lingers for longer than you would expect. The visuals are composed to make you feel like this is real. The reason why these moments are so important is because it allows the audience time to interpret what is happening. In order to truly understand how these characters are feeling, you need these scenes that show them going about their lives. It makes the story more cohesive and doesn't leave us with questions on where characters have been, as opposed to scenes in later seasons where it seems like they had too much time to set up for a shot. Everything is perfectly symmetrical, and the subject appears to be the only point of interest. The visuals are composed to make you feel like this is real. However, I would argue that scenes in later seasons have an almost artificial quality. When scenes take time with their transitions, it allows for a character-driven story and takes away the opportunity for plot holes. The early seasons trusted the audience to connect the dots from scene to scene without anyone stepping in to explain exactly what is happening. Which brings me to my next point. Season 5's major disconnect from previous seasons is the overabundance of exposition. Instead of allowing the mystery to slowly reveal itself through actions and discoveries, the later seasons often pause the story so characters can explain the rules of the world out loud.
My plan is faster, bolder, better.
Plans are laid out step by step, motivations are clarified, and the mechanics of the Upside Down are spelled out in detail.
At what I hope to be a gentle 30 miles an hour, which will allow
You and Harrington to fall along in the right side up. Just remember, try and keep the telemetry signal within -60 and -70 dB. Easy peasy.
In earlier seasons, characters were constantly operating on incomplete information. They made guesses, theories, and sometimes completely wrong assumptions about what's happening. That uncertainty made the world feel larger and more dangerous because no one truly understood the forces they were dealing with. But once the show begins explaining everything, that uncertainty disappears. The audience is no longer trying to piece together the mystery alongside the characters. Instead, the mystery is simply presented to us as information. The unknown becomes something that can be diagrammed, explained, and ultimately solved. And while exposition can make a story easier to follow, it also removes the tension that comes from not knowing. Let's take a look at some of the scenes in Season 1 that allow that tension of not knowing to come through.
All right, your mom's been through enough already.
He's my brother.
Listen to me. I'm gonna find him. All right? You gotta trust me on this.
Right now in the story, we really didn't have any clue what was going on, but instead of explaining it to the audience, they took the time to develop relationships between characters. They wanted the audience to feel what it would be like if they were there watching this unfold in person. Take this scene for example. Everyone is at the school so that they can make a deprivation tank for 11. This scene could have been short. We all know what's going on here, but the camera takes its time with each group of characters so that the audience has time to adjust to the new setting. And from this, we were able to gain a lot more information that otherwise would have been overlooked. This allows for a deeper connection between the characters. This creates tension that would otherwise be missed with precision cuts. In the earlier seasons, scenes were allowed to just exist. We didn't always understand what was happening, but the camera took its time moving between different groups of characters. This let the audience settle into each moment before moving on. Those pauses give us time to notice the small details, the reactions, the atmosphere, the subtle hidden clues in the background. Because of that, We learned things about the world and the characters that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. It created a deeper connection to the people in the story, and it built tension naturally. Instead of relying on rapid cuts or constant action, the show trusted that a quiet moment could be just as powerful. And I'll see you in the next video.